Like the sea, time returns in waves, carrying stories, questions, and voices that demand to be heard. Here we explore social, gender, and climate justice through culture, lived experience, and the tides of change. I am Ileana, this is Ebb of Time, and with that, welcome to this episode. So here we are with a new episode, and I'm very excited to have Igor with me. Today we will discuss a topic that has been already covered probably a million times, but today we will have like a different coverage. So it's been 4 years since Russia has launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And let me read some here like numbers because I don't want to say something wrong. But according to United Nations records, more than 15,000 civilians died, 41,000 injuries, and 10 million displacement since February 2022. And this is not the only toll, but also Russia has launched thousands of attacks to health system in Ukraine, but also targeting the energy infrastructure that has caused many problems for people in Ukraine who are still living there, especially during the winter time. And today what we will focus is more on the images that we see every day. And since the last 4 years, I believe we have seen so many destructions, videos of missiles, these alarms, and horrible images from the destructions, but also from in terms of human casualties. And I think this is something that maybe us as people who are not Ukrainian or who do not live there, who do not experience war firsthand, it has this desensitizing impact. I fully believe that we should show, and media needs to show the reality that is happening, the horrors of war. But I think we are in a situation that we have been seeing so many of those. It has become just another post on Instagram or just another video on the media. And this is why I wanted to talk to Igor. We met at this event organized by the UK mission in Brussels. And it was an event where he presented his new work, 100 Days of War, which will come later to it. But first, I want Igor, for you to introduce yourself, and then we can go into the discussion of how these images impact, but also how art plays an important role when explaining and showing the horrors of war to people. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Irina. My name is Igor Chekachkov. I'm a Ukrainian photographer I'm not based anywhere now. Let's say somewhere in Europe. And since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, my main focus in work are home, the notion of home and identity, the way how war and displacement shape our identity. And I published a book about it, but I'm working, all my work now is all around this.
Amazing. Before we go into your work, the 100 Days of War, I wanted to ask you actually, because before the war, there was more like a normal life you were living there, I assume. So how did you start with your artistic journey, and what was your way of expressing yourself? Because then, and maybe I'm right or not, but with the war, I think it shifted a little bit, right? How were you experiencing the world, and how the war impacted your view of art and also like identity and culture?
Yeah, the war affected and changed everything in my practice. When I just started, which was like 2008, if I'm not mistaken, I started as a photojournalist. I was invited to work in the agency where I started my photography journey. And on one hand, I really loved it. On other, I was disappointed in photojournalism very soon. And a few years later, I met a few people who helped me to understand the photography is much more than this photojournalistic approach. And one of those is Boris Mikhailov, who is one of I think he's the most famous artist from Ukraine. He is about his mid-70s now. And what he and some other people around him did was, back then in 70s in Soviet Kharkiv, they started a movement, which back then it didn't have a name, but in 70s, photography was forbidden. Like in Soviet Union, photography was forbidden. It could be either a tool of propaganda or it could be something amateurish. And what Boris Mikhailov and Evgeny Pavlov and other people did, they started to do kind of underground type of photography. So they couldn't participate in exhibitions. They were shooting all the things which are not allowed to shoot, and the exhibitions were in their kitchens. And this underground movement of photography was later called Kharkiv School of Photography, and I'm from Kharkiv myself. So when I met these people from different generations of Kharkiv School of Photography, I understood that all I want to do is art photography. I don't want to do photojournalism. And back then I think in 2013, I finished my first art project, and it was widely exhibited, not just in Ukraine, but in other countries. And then I understood, okay, this is what I would love to do all the time. And somewhere around then, I also started to teach photography. First, I was invited in different schools. Then I opened my own school, and I was also teaching in the university in Kharkiv School of Architecture. It's the first architectural private university in Ukraine. So I was teaching there in my school photography. I was doing my own art projects, and as I'm not sure if artist life can be stable at all, but I think this is the closest I get to stability. I've had a stable life in Kharkiv, a very normal life, right? And then in 2022, it suddenly changed. All the structures, everything I had in Kharkiv, like my family, my partner, my friends, my jobs, everything was suddenly not accessible. And I moved to the west of Ukraine in the very first day because Kharkiv is the city that borders Russia. And when the war comes to your country, you can never know what to do. And I had no idea what to do. It just felt instinctively, I felt that probably to go to the west of Ukraine is something smart to do, since this is what I did. Also, my partner back then, she was living in Kiev, so I had to be reunited with her, and I went to Kiev, I took her, and we went to the west of Ukraine. And since then, my life never had this familiar route. Any routines I had before, they disappeared, and I started to reinvent everything from scratch, which was obviously very stressful and hard. But on the other hand, it also gave this chance to reevaluate your life and kind of get out from your habits and start to think and question what your life really was. And when you have chance to reinvent everything, how would you do that?
And how did you do it?
First weeks were very intense because, again, we had no idea what war is and how to deal with it. And every day shaped our reality in a very different way. And back then we were optimistic. We felt that we are on the right side of history and we are winning for some reason. For some reason, we had this optimism that we will win very soon. So being full of optimism and energy and, of course, also anxiety and uncertainty, we're trying to somehow reinvent the life. And back then I felt that on one hand, I didn't have home anymore. And again, I didn't have job and all the things which were very common. On other, I was kind of privileged, displaced, because I had friends who helped me a lot. There was this woman, Tatiana Bunyak, who hosted me and my partner, and she had a big house, and she hosted me and a few other displaced, and she said, you can live there as long as you want. I felt that we had this privilege to be helped by other people, and this is one of the things which it really inspired me back then, and it stays with me still, this experience of how people were united and helping each other. So many people from the east of Ukraine were coming to the west, and so many people from the western Ukraine were helping eastern Ukrainians, and it was huge. So I felt that I kind of lost everything, apparently, but I also was around people who were giving me so much, and it was a very inspiring feeling that gives a lot of energy and vitality.
No, indeed. And I think that's a very important part of wars because indeed, like this resilience that Ukrainian people showed, but also the solidarity that they showed to each other. I think this is also a very touching part of the story, right? And I think it has a lot of impact on people's well-being and mental health as well. Because I was just reading like a report, and it was talking about how um, well, of course, for soldiers like experiencing PTSD and etc., but also for the people who are not necessarily um, on the front lines. I think this kind of solidarity and support helps a little bit to ease the stress and anxiety. But now I want to also come back to your project, 100 Days of War. From my personal perspective, I've been to different like exhibitions about war and like I don't know, Ukrainian artists, but also from other countries, because currently in the world you can find a lot of wars, right? And they were very, of course, impressive and very touching because you see the destruction. But that, for instance, did not made me want to do a podcast with them or to organize something, because to me that was so usual to see, because this is something that I see every single day on social media, on Instagram. I can see the videos of people dying, people crying in Ukraine, in Gaza, here and there. But then I saw your book and it was very interesting because it was just a normal day, but under the war. You could feel that everything shifted, everything changed. Indeed, routines are not there anymore, and you need to live in more difficult conditions. And that picture did not include violence, but it made me feel a lot of things. So maybe can you talk about this project? How did you start? Did you start with the intention of this becoming a whole book? What was your methods and what was your feeling when you started doing this?
When I started doing it, I don't think I really understood what and why I'm doing. In this very first day, there were a lot of questions about what should I do, and not just what should I do as a photographer. It was first of all, what should I do? Like, what should I do as a partner, as a son, as a citizen, right? As a human being. And also there was this question, what should I do as an artist? Because I knew that something is happening which should be processed somehow. And back then, so many photographers contacted me about what, like, some foreigners were coming and they were contacting me saying that we are coming. Some Ukrainian photographers were also discussing where they go. And I understood that, even though I didn't see any images yet, I already understood that there are so many photographers who will be here documenting this war. I felt almost, I wouldn't say relief, but I felt that I definitely don't have to do that, because I don't want to do something which so many people doing. There is no need. And that's why I started to think, what can I do as an artist? And I was moving from the early morning somewhere to the west, and I was thinking that maybe this is something I can focus on, like this personal journey. And it was the form of what I will do was still very unclear. Like, for example, I knew that probably it should be a diary. Should it be something that I will share with people? I didn't really know. Also, there is a contradiction here, because on one hand I was thinking, okay, this is something personal, maybe it will never be seen by anyone. But I did it in English. Because there was something in me saying, okay, if, like, you are still an artist, right? You're a photographer, so you are doing something, and maybe this something can be shared at some point. If you want to share it, who you want to share it with? Definitely not Ukrainians. They're going through exactly the same thing. So also back then, in 2022, again, I am from the east of Ukraine, from Kharkiv, which is a Russian-speaking city. I was speaking Russian all my life, with my parents, with my friends, in my school. We had lesson of Ukrainian, but everything else was in Russian. So until the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, I was speaking Russian. And already on this first day, I understood that there is no way I can do it in Russian. It just doesn't feel right. Also, my Ukrainian was even worse than my English. So first of all, there is no need to share it with Ukrainian. Secondly, I don't feel comfortable expressing myself in Ukrainian, so I did it in English, knowing that if one day I will share it with someone, it should be someone who never experienced what it is like when a war comes to a country. Now, like, since 2022, I switched to Ukrainian, so now for me it would be very difficult to express myself in Russian because I already forgot this language, almost forgot. And this is one of the things I was talking in the book, the way how our identity is shaped by the language. And why didn't I even question Russian language before? But unfortunately, this was our reality, that in the east of Ukraine, Ukrainian culture was suppressed much more than in the Western. And I think I didn't really realize it until I moved to Lviv in 2022. So yeah, I was moving to the West, and I was writing notes about what's happening. I was making some images, and some of the images I was making, like a photographer with a camera, and like knowing this is a good image. Some of the images were just very quick notes, which I made on my phone. And both of them are present in the book. And sometimes I even feel that those images made very quickly on the phone are even stronger than the one which I made with the camera.
Hmm.
And back then, it was not possible to print anything in the printing shop because everything was closed for the first few weeks. So I had these Instax printers with me, which like a small prints small image, like Polaroid look like image, right? And I printed images with these Instax printers I had, and I put them in the notebook, handwriting the notes. And it was the form which I started. In the beginning, I felt that it should be something like one image per day and one note per day, but very soon it evolved into something very different, much less rigid.
Hmm.
And I was doing it for quite a while, and my intention was to document the beginning and the end of the war. I was so naive. Then, somewhere in the middle of the book, I understood that the war will not finish any soon. I will not finish it like this. So I limited myself to 100 days for a few reasons. One of them was very practical. My Moleskine notebook was finishing around 100 days, so it felt like a good place to end. Also, at that point, the war, which was already more than 3 months, it became, I don't want to say repetitive, but it became familiar. The most intense part of rebuilding our life, understanding what's happening, it kind of started fading, and there is another chapter started to evolve, the chapter where we already know what the war is. It's our daily life. And I think this is also why I understood that the diary should be finished.
Okay, that's interesting. So I will add some of the images. So tell me if you want to go through some of them and explain some of them. But I found that actually very interesting, and I want to actually know, because you were saying that you wanted to start with the war and you wanted to end it with the end of the war, and along the way somewhere you realize that that's not really happening. Do we see it? Do we see, or maybe when you look back at this book, do you see clearly where your hopes started to disappear, or where you were more hopeful that the war was going to end, and then suddenly like the change of your mind, because this project is from your heart and your experiences, and for the people who will look at your work and get your book, and I assume they can order it online.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. How do you see this change happening throughout the book from the artist's perspective of a finished artwork?
Yeah, when you do a book, and actually I published my first photo book just a few months before the full-scale war. So I had this long years of working on the book. And back then, and usually how you work on books, there is this process of sequencing and editing where you think and you arrange images and think which
Hmm.
one will be after another, which was not the case in this book because every day something was happening and I was putting the images from day by day. So I couldn't really make a good montage of everything. The editing there it was happening on the go. But at some point I understood that the form of the book changes because in the very beginning I feel like you can feel the stress I had and the anxiety which was accompanying me doing these images and writing the text. First of all, there was a lot of text and the images were, I think I was very constricted by form and I wanted to say so much and I was not able to say as much as I want. And you can feel this tension on the first pages. And then the pace of the word kind of started to slow down. And I mean, again, slow down meaning we just started to get used to it. And you can feel how pages becomes more free from this stress. Of course, stress and anxiety was always there, but it's the form changed. So the way how I put images there, the way how how I work with text changed a lot. And I think the ending also it kind of ends on hopeful note still, even though we understood that the war is not finishing any soon, but we kind of accepted that now it is part of our life. This is one of the saddest thing about what is happening, that people are just getting used to the worst condition and we are just accepting everything.
No, that's true, unfortunately. And I'm also like in the meanwhile looking at the pictures that you have sent at the book actually, which I will present them. But for instance, on day 57, there are pictures of like co-living and like people living their lives, and especially there is like some kids there. And I think that's, well, I don't know, I find it very emotional, because it's just the outside there is like a world of horrors, and then what you captured there is people still trying to live their lives. And to me that is, well, I'm even right now so finding it difficult to speak. That says so many things, I think. And indeed, like 57 days, maybe it's the time when you're also started realizing and people becoming more used to like hearing those bombs and missiles and already knowing what to do, when to evacuate, where to go, etc. So it is becoming the normal. And I think what we experienced here in the West, I mean, Western than Ukraine, was um, member states or politicians trying to figure out what to do, how to help, how to deal with the crisis, but then people absolutely being shocked that this was happening so close to their home. Anxiety from the countries that were previously under the Soviet Union, so the fear of experiencing themselves, also a lot of displacement, so new a wave of migration. And I think people sometimes forget these kind of daily lives when you're trying to figure out what to do, what's happening there, how to react, and etc. So how do you see your work compared to, and not to compare with, of course, anyone else's work, but how do you see this difference between showing the destruction, the missiles, the videos, and etc. on the army, the tanks, but also on the other side, this sort of daily life and people trying to still live their life, as if nothing is happening, but everything is happening outside.
I feel like the history of war photography was shaped by ones who were coming from the Western countries to war zones, spending there some time and living. And it gave some understanding probably what war can look like, but they never experienced what it is like to live through war. What it is like when the war comes to your country, when the city, which was so familiar to you, suddenly becomes strange because it's completely changes due to the war. And again, what it is like to wake up every day knowing that you are waking up in your country, which was peaceful just a while ago, and now it tears apart by rockets and drones. So I guess I didn't have this conscious decision and understanding what I'm doing, but I felt that I was photographing what is happening to me and to my people. And it is not just destruction, and it is not just crying people. There are so much more into this. There are so many horrible things happening. There are so many beautiful things which are also happening, like this union of people, this helping of people, the love they give to each other and support amongst all the destructions. So I guess this is the book. Yes, it is about the war, but it is also about life and how it is, how people are reinventing it and again helping and supporting, and what it is like to live in the war, not what it is like to die.
Mhm.
And I don't think that foreign photographers could really understand this and could really touch this. And this is also one of the topics which I touch in the book. I don't want to really criticize anyone because there are so many photographers doing an amazing job, and there are so many foreign photographers doing amazing work. But I also sometimes felt how limited it is. And again, I like met one photographer, Emin Osman, a Turkish photographer who came to Ukraine, and I was working with him for a while. And the way how he approached people, it was so inspiring. The way how sensitive he was. He comes to a person, he comes there without a camera, he sits there, he just listens, full of empathy. And then, very modestly, he asks, "Can I photograph you?" And he was fine if they say no. And I felt also later I found out from someone else that he won a prize for his work, and it was like 10,000 or more, and he donated all this money to Ukraine. He never even mentioned this to me, and he didn't like make a post I'm donating this. He just quietly helped, which is amazing. And there were some other photographers who come to Ukraine and who was just treating people like an image. If they're not, if they cannot give them an image of suffering, these people are not interesting to them. And I've worked with someone like this also quite a lot. So when I was experiencing these people, these tourists who are coming just to consume someone's suffering, just to make their work, not even to publish it even sometimes in the magazine, but just to make like a vanity, a book or an exhibition or something. It felt I was questioning photography language a lot and photographers, like who they are, so what kind of work is it? Coming to someone's country for a couple of weeks, knowing nothing about history or culture, or pretending they know something because they studied it for a couple of hours. And doing these images, which we've seen so many times, again, with the cliche images from war. And what are they doing? For whom they're doing it? What is happening? So I guess I was, again, back then it wasn't like a rational decision, but what I was doing, I was trying to do something very different. I was showing what we are going through, and it's not this what tourists can grasp. It actually can be compared probably to every tourism, not just this photography war tourism. When you go to like Paris for a weekend, can you really understand what Paris is or any other place? Of course you cannot. You can come back with the Eiffel Tower image and something else.
Yeah, that's no, that's true. And the thing is, those that you are mentioning, those like who look at people as images, and if they are suffering enough, they are worth picturing. Those are the ones that we are seeing more and more, because they are
Yes.
the ones that are catchy. They are the ones that make because it's like every day it changes. Like today I see something, and tomorrow I probably don't remember it. So tomorrow I need to see something still interesting. And I think that's the kind of media they are serving for, because they are being asked to actually provide images like that. I'm not sure if their editor would be interested if they brought like for the news, like a normal image. But I think that's also the problem that we have, because I also wonder what you think about it. I was doing some research for this episode also, but it's also a topic that I'm quite interested in, on the desensitization that we might have about this. And I think media is facing a lot of dilemma in these terms, because in one hand you need to tell the story, because there is some huge destruction that is happening and a huge suffering that is happening. And there, on the other hand, you have the option to not show it, but then people will not be aware of it. So there is this like two sides of it. But then if you show this every single day, and I think with the social media, it's happening more and more, because everyone with a camera can actually take a picture and share it. And then I feel like that creates a little bit of numbness, you're desensitized. You see another one and you scroll. You don't even realize maybe you've already seen that picture or not, but that picture is actually a destruction of or death of many people. So I understand also from the media perspective how this kind of serves them, but it also kind of creates a lot of anxiety and depression on the people outside, which might become even more tired. And I think they call it a compassion fatigue. So it is something when you are you are exposed in a prolonged way to other people's suffering, you kind of your emotions, I think it cannot cope anymore, so it becomes desensitized. So I feel like there is no win-win in this situation. That one way you're showing because you need to show it, and the war has been continuing since 4 years already. And on the other hand, you're creating this mass of people who don't feel anything anymore. So I wonder, because your photography and because your art does not show that, and you place a lot of importance of identity, because on your pictures you can see like the life of Ukrainian, of the parts of culture, parts of way of living. How do you see this difference, and what do you think, for instance, should be the right way to do as a comment? Because there is, I mean, we probably cannot decide on what is right or what is wrong. But how do you see this dilemma, and how do you see the role of art actually playing in this?
It's a very complicated question. There was a good book on the sufferings of others by Susan Sontag, which she wrote, I think, in 2001, or somewhere around that. And back then she was saying that exactly the same things as you said, that the images, war images, are not working anymore because we are desensitized to them. There are too many of repetitive imagery from wars. Can you imagine that she said this before the digital photography came to us, before social media came to us? So in pre-digital era, she already said that we lost our sensitivity to war images.
Mhm.
And of course, this is happening right now. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I'm doing something different. But also, I don't have an answer what media should do, because I am sad when I see that the attention shifts somewhere else. But also when I see the same images from Ukraine, even I am not sensitive to them as much as I was in the very beginning. I'm just looking at these images trying to see if this is a place I know which was attacked.
Mhm.
I'm looking to address more to than the image. And media, well, this was also one of the reasons why I was quite disappointed in photojournalism, because I felt that it is a very limited way of working with photography and presenting the reality. That's why I shifted to art photography. So what I did in my last book, what I'm doing with exhibitions, is trying to show something else. Unfortunately, it doesn't have as wide coverage as some media does. So I just hope that media will find also the way how to talk about so many other things. One of the first things I'm sure they should do is stop working so much with foreigners and to give more voice to local photographers, which they're doing, and they can do more. Because what again, we were talking about these photographers who come there for a week, and I remember I was arguing with one of the media because they were searching for a fixer to work. Like fixer is the one who shows right on the ground, basically like kind of producer who organizes all the shootings and who has all the contacts and all the language. So they were inviting one photographer for a week, and they were searching for fixer, for translator, for a driver. They were searching for a hotel to stay. Like, there's so much money involved for again a tourist to come to make your work. There are local photographers. First of all, when the war comes to your country and all your routines are disappearing, any financial support is crucial. So if any magazine gives money to these photographers and to foreign photographers, it's already huge. But also they can do a much deeper work in terms of what they can say. And I believe now, when we saw so many repetitive images from war, it's time to show something very different, very new.
Mhm.
So giving voices to local artists, to photographers who explore some new realities, it's very important. Also, it shouldn't be always local. I know some photographers who come to Ukraine for such a long time, like they spend months there. They have a lot of friends. Some of them even knows language, so they can also go deeper now. In the beginning, and still, again, now there are so many repetitive images of just news that we have to somehow, still, we have to photograph all this. It is very important for history. It's probably also important for some media coverage, but we also have to find new ways. And there are
Mhm.
so many stories untold.
No, that's true. And I mean, you were mentioning that foreigners. You were just mentioning about this other photographer that was not Ukrainian, and in your opinion, he did a good job, and then gave back to the society in a way that he donated the money, etc. I think there's like maybe it's the part on empathy that is missing from. Yeah, again, I don't want to speak badly or criticize anyone, so I'm also trying to choose my words wisely. But after all, if when it becomes like a business to show the most attractive news or last minute or etc., maybe empathy is not there always necessarily, and that's why, I mean, what local artists bring, indeed, they know their way around. They know the people. They are from that culture, but I think they have probably higher empathy towards what's happening because they're living in it. And this is where I believe art also makes the difference, because media needs to continue, it needs to have this continuation, it needs to have the clicks, it needs to have the income in a way. I mean, unfortunately, because currently it's so little money that they get, or it's so difficult for media to also sustain. But then the artists, what they can bring is the feeling, the empathy there. And I think that's intentionally or unintentionally your work also does. And there might be a difference in the sense of how you see the world and what you intend to do with it. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think about this? Because there
Yes,
is the
yeah,
aesthetic part of the, I mean, I don't mean it in a bad way, but the aesthetic part of the war, the huge destruction, is very aesthetic, next to something showing like a disrupted routine, or something like that. So if you see what I mean.
yes. There is this spectacle of war, which is very easy to, not easy to photograph, but it's very easy to go there to show the war on from this perspective. You're right. I was also thinking about how empathy is important, and I guess that photography, the history of photography, for a very long time was shaped by this almost colonial approach when Western photographers go somewhere. It doesn't have to be war. It just to have to be somehow exotic. They go there, they photograph something, and then they bring it back, and they show it in galleries, in magazines, and so on. And for so many photographers, especially photographers from older generation, photography is still like this. They can never do the work in their countries, like in the States or like, France or something, but they know how to do the work in other countries.
Mhm.
And I think that, or I hope that contemporary photography, contemporary documentary photography is different. It's more about local communities and about local people. It's more about empathy. Now, having a good eye or a good skill is not enough. Empathy is the key. And I hope that today's photography would be shaped by these people who has empathy and who not just money to go somewhere. Maybe actually money was one of the tools which was very important, right? In more developed countries, there were access to good equipment, to traveling, right? And not everyone could really do that. And now in the UK, I actually see a lot of exhibitions, and the way how I think UK is doing a good job. I mean, I'm not a good judge of it, but the way how they address their colonial past is very interesting. They talk about this a lot, and they think about this a lot, and they show it. And I've seen a few exhibitions, for example, from Africa, from different parts of Africa, but not of white male going there and photographing, but the way how photography was actually present there before, and the way how they rediscover, like showing it now, it's quite fascinating.
Mhm.
So I hope that local communities will have more voices. But again, it's not only about being local. You are right that this is more about empathy. And when you are not going to an exotic place, just seeing exotic, beautiful images would be a destroyed building, like any spectacle, right? You start to be more sensitive to other things. Also, it's so hard, for example, to be sensitive and maybe even to be empathic to people who you don't even have a common language with. If you can't speak their language, the communication becomes quite superficial, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And when you were talking about the colonized way of doing, I remember, I mean, my childhood, I remember it seeing all the time, the picture of a starving African kid. That's like I think the textbook what you were talking about, and it's also there's a lot of ethical issues about the dignity of it, the dignity of the community, the dignity of the people that you present as they are suffering. Look, they are suffering. Look, these poor people, like, and we need to be the bigger one to help them, to kind of save them in a way. And I feel like having this mentality, also taking a picture of a, I don't know, crying old lady that was impacted from a war. There's like a lot of background questions of it. It might look emotional, it might look interesting, but were there like consent taken from this person? Was this considered? And I think that's a big part of war photography, or photography that is, I don't know, going to this underprivileged community or etc. So indeed, it's good to hear that it is changing slowly, but I think there is still a lot of way to go, right? You mentioned that UK is doing a good job, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing a lot of these things like here around Brussels, or dominating the media also. And I think that's maybe the trickier part, because indeed then you need a lot of resources to do that in a way.
Yes, and this is another question. For example, I know for sure what to do as an artist, but if I don't have an exposure to show it, it means nothing, right? No matter how deep and insightful these images are. So until media will also change their approach, I'm actually quite happy, because I was mostly again working with books or exhibitions, and recently this work from 100 Days of War was published in Financial Times, which is a very strange form for it, but it gained some attention, and I am very grateful for this. Of course, it was much more limited than the book or an exhibition can be, but still, there are editors who are open for experiments and who are doing amazing work. But I guess that this media should be also challenged, not just what photographers and artists do, because very often photographers will do what media will tell them, right? What they know they will sell. And how media is changing, how to change it. I can talk about what I can do as an artist, but media is such a complicated question. And again, there's so much information nowadays that I struggle to read the news, and I struggle to read media as well. And I think they have to do much greater work to gain our attention and to give something meaningful. And yet there is less money in media than it was before. So it's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if we need so much news. I have these questions about the news industry as well. I just feel how depressed we are. I am, of reading everything. And on one hand, of course, we should know about this, but on the other, there should be a proper balance of how not to be drowned in this endless scrolling of news and just feeling powerless in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's what it creates, right? Because you see it every single day. You're trying to do something, maybe in your own capacity to do some activism or etc. You're going to the protest, you're voting, you're doing this and that, and then every single day you hear more and more destruction, more and more death, and then you feel like, okay, now what do I do now? I'll just go in my room, hide under my blanket, and wait until this all ends, right? Because what can I do? And indeed, it gives a lot of, like, I don't know, hopelessness in a way. And I feel it as well sometimes. Even I, why am I saying even I? Because I consider myself as a very emotional person. And I remember, I think 2 years ago it was, when they brought, it's not about media, right? It's also about in general. In front of the European Parliament, there were these two, so there was an ambulance, and I think there was a fire truck from Ukraine. They were brought here, and then they had so many holes, so many bullet holes. So they were absolutely destroyed. And I think it stayed for like a little while. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly, but I was seeing it and seeing it because I walked past the European Parliament almost every day. And after all, I realized that I started not seeing it anymore. It was not there anymore. And then at one point they removed it, obviously, because I think it served its goal there. But we need to do something about it, because I myself, as a person who claims to care about things, started not seeing the huge car there anymore, because it was like I saw it every day. Okay, I felt it, but next day I don't feel it anymore. Or 1 week later, I don't feel it anymore. So also, I don't have an answer to this. I don't know what to do indeed. But I am worried about how this is making us as citizens like feel. And I was even reading in a report that it was saying, again, in relation to this, that kids actually are also becoming more numb about seeing this, but also developing less empathy. And these are the adults of tomorrow. So that is quite worrying. And maybe before we wrap up, I want to ask you actually, and this is purely from your perspective, your opinion. There's nothing right or wrong, because you said you know what to do from an artistic perspective. Then what do you think we should do, like citizens who are doom scrolling and seeing every day destruction? How can we maybe do some little things to change our thinking, or how we see the world, or how we approach to this kind of content, also destruction? I mean, in my opinion, one of the things is to indeed see more art and engage more with projects like yours that show the normal ways. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective also.
Very hard to answer. I really think that I hope that if people, as you said, engage with art, and I hope that if they read my book, they will see that war is not something extraordinary. It's like normal life that suddenly was changed. And unfortunately, I don't feel that Europe is safe anymore. I don't think that the war is that far. And this is also one of the things that this book or some art, like what Ukraine can show. Suddenly the country, the place which was very peaceful can be changed completely. And until we realize this, we are not safe. And of course we have to do something. I would love people to do as much as they can to donate to help Ukraine, like donate, for example, something or volunteer. Or I had recently a talk in London on my book launch, and a few British people came and they were telling me their stories, how they came to Ukraine just to help people, and it was very, very inspiring. And I felt so happy that people who are so far from this, but they're still helping. And of course, no, not everyone can go there and help, but if you can donate $10 for some Ukrainian hospital or something, or Ukrainian army or whatever you find more useful, I think it will be really tangible help.
No, of course. And political pressure, right? We as citizens get also use that power that we have, the little power that we still have, I would say, to put political pressure on our countries to actually change this, because this is
Yes,
just the destruction of the whole international rules based that we call, which I don't remember the last maybe like 2 decades that I've seen the big powers complying by those. But yeah, at least like
something hopeful happened recently in Hungary, their elections.
yes,
Hopefully, it will continue some in this direction.
yeah, exactly. I mean, hopefully now with the change in the government in Hungary, there will be the support will be unlocked actually that was blocked. So indeed, that's a good development, and fingers crossed to see this happening.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
But you know, I saw a lot of things in Ukraine, and I still witnessing this. So there is like government doing something, but also so many people are so engaging in the war. Like, for example, the way how most of the soldiers are funded. Of course, they're funded by government, but they're underfunded still. And like, if they need something, like someone needs a scope or someone needs like night vision, there are people who are gathering money for this. They say we need like $2,000 for this night vision, this battalion for this particular soldier. Other donate as much, like they can donate $2, they can donate $100, but this is how so many things are happening there. And every day I see all the people who are gathering money for different battalions, for drones, for defense, for hospitals. And this is amazing how people are engaged and how they're helping. And I've never experienced this before. So it's not just waiting for the government to change. It's also knowing that every day we can do something. At least share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's true. And we are approaching 1 hour already, and I loved talking to you. I think this was a very nice discussion. I mean, nice in a as it can be because we were talking about the war, but also we are talking about art. So I would like to thank you so much. And I hope I did not create an environment that made you relive the trauma or the anxiety that you had. But I think it's important to talk about your work, and I mean the listeners or the viewers now will see it on the screen about the pictures when we were talking about them, but also on social media, so they can also engage and they can get more information about you and your book as well. So I would like to thank you so much again. Thank you so much for your openness and for sharing, and thank you for those listening. Until the next time, take care.